Welcome to Fantasy Grounds College Tutorial Series, Character Creation 101 or CC 101, D&D 5th Edition, Create Your First Character. I'm going to show you guys how to set up a character the right way, or at least a more complete way of doing your character. By no means is this the way you absolutely have to do it, but I do recommend that you try this before you do your own method. So last but not least, let's get this campaign setup going. This particular screen here is the second screen in a series of setup windows. I'm only going to load the 5e core rules. The 5e core rules is the player's handbook, the dungeon master's guide, and the monster manual. Now that I've seen that these are confirmed, I'm going to close this X here, and I'm going to now go to modules because I want to load a couple other books which will help lend itself to character creation. And one of those is the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So I'm going to do a search down here. And this will make it available so that I can create a character with the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So I'm going to load the player's guide. And I don't have anyone connected to my table, so I don't need to share it. And I'm going to click load. And that should be all I need for this basic class. So this class assumes that you have a basic standard license or a subscription and the 3 core rule books. And then I also added in the Fantasy Grounds version of Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So I'm going to go ahead and close this for now. I'm going to click on Library. And as you can see, I have all the books loaded here, plus one additional. So another thing I will do, since this is character creation, is I'm going to click Create PC. And that'll make sure I have all the banners that I need for character creation, which is up here on the top. And if I need to look something up, as if I had the hardback book or D&D Beyond, you click on the library and you have all these links here which take you to different aspects of the book. And in this case, I'm going to grab the reference manual. Now, the reference manual is a digital representation of Fantasy Grounds version of the hardback books. So all of these chapters correspond with the actual hardback. One caveat is character creation. This book was written for the tabletop version of Dungeons & Dragons. So the steps that are illustrated here in the actual official book do not correspond or correlate directly with Fantasy Grounds. So meaning that this rule set was developed after Fantasy Grounds was developed. So the author of Fantasy Grounds, or the owners, are not going to rewrite their software just to fit one rule set, nor is Smiteworks going to recreate the reference manual to fit the interface. So this is going to have to do for looking up reference material. So this is one reason I'm going to show you how to make a character with Fantasy Grounds. So it says choose race, class, things like that. This will not go correctly if you try to build a character that way. You will lose the automation and things won't calculate correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, but I did want you to see where the reference manual is. You have a search menu, and then you have page navigation with the arrows. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Next thing I'm going to do is lay out my screen a little better. So when I mean a little better, I'm talking about having room for everything. So in character creation, I don't really need the chat window so much, but I'm going to keep it up so I can see what's happening. So I'm going to right click on this and clear it. And that will allow for this to be nice and clean and tidy to the eye. Now this background here is the default image. So if I want to change that, I'm going to go to the options. I'm going to go down in the GM area and it says desktop decal Smiteworks. I'm just going to change this to the FGC banner. I find that fitting for the actual class. And I want to turn the dice tower in case I want to look at something or test something. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here for dice tower. And if I only click it on for here, only the players will be able to see the dice tower. I will not. So I'm going to go ahead and click on show GM roles. And now the dice tower is visible. There are a few other settings that I might change during a campaign, but being that this is character creation, I don't think I really need to get too in depth on what all these settings are. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now that I have the dice tower, I'm going to unlock it and left click and drag it and drop it right next to the three-dimensional dice. I'm going to unlock this here and go ahead and drag it over and lock it. So now I have a nice setup here. And now I'm going to open the combat tracker. And I have this set here in case I want to test some of my powers or abilities. So now the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the PC banner. And as you can see, it is blank right now. And I really don't have a whole lot of custom options loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and load those while we're here. I'm going to load some of Rob 2E's coding effects, which are very helpful during the character creation process, especially near the end when you want to do some customization, so that you can fully take advantage of the power of Fantasy Grounds, and so that you don't have to look up rules and guess what's going on during a campaign. And also, it just kind of gives you a better understanding of some of the things that Fantasy Grounds is capable of. So I'm going to go ahead and activate some more modules. By no means do you have to have these, but I do highly recommend them. So I'm going to click on Library. I'm going to click on the basically on the Modules button down here. And as you can see, I have these loaded in my Modules folder in Fantasy Grounds. But I'm only going to look for the ones that will help me with character creation. So right now, I'm going to use this 5e background and class equipment bundles. It's something that Rob developed and something I kind of helped him with. And that basically gives you the option to just drag over equipment in one shot instead of just taking whatever at one at a time. So that's very helpful. I'm going to load the conditions and effects in case I want to test something. And what that does is it adds up here. You get a nice handy list of effects that you might need throughout an adventure that are in addition to the standard conditions. Next thing is I'm going to load the 5e effects coding class features. So what this does is it adds all of the automation for the 5th edition rule set for your class features. Next, I'm going to do the 5e coding feats, just in case I need those for my character creation. Some people liked those feats, even though they're optional. And I'm going to also load the 5e effects coding race traits. And I'm going to load the 5e effects coding spells. And what this does is it supplements and augments the spells that are already in your library if you own the player's handbook. And what it does is it adds a little bit of in-depth descriptions, and it makes sure that the coding is fully complete. The next step is I'm going to look for the 5e trinkets with items. And that is a kind of a backstory / roleplay type module. So 5e trinkets table with items. There we go. So the next step is I'm going to actually start creating the character. So now I have all the materials that I want to use to create the character. So I'm going to close the library. And I just demonstrated basically the library view and adding extra third-party stuff as well as some Wizards of the Coast stuff. So you have official content mixed with some third-party stuff. And in this case, it was Rob 2E's coding effects package. So I'm going to create a character by clicking on the plus button. And that brings up a new character sheet. The first thing I need to do and very important, is to create the ability scores. Now, there's many methods of doing this, but I prefer to do the standard array for character creation, especially for newer people. That way your character is more balanced and it's not overpowered in one facet or another of the ability scores. So you get to use 6 scores. They are based on a point buy system, and it's called the standard array. So it's 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. You can use these in any order you like. When you go to edit these ability scores, you don't really have to double click or anything. You single click and you edit. So I think I'm going to create a cleric. Clerics are kind of tricky, and they tend to have a lot of extra stuff that you have to do to the characters. So this way you'll have a good idea of some of the depth that Fantasy Grounds offers. If I created just a fighter, you'd probably miss out on some of that stuff, especially regarding spells and cleric domains and things like that. So I'm going to give this guy just a kind of a little bit of strength. So there's 12. I think that's a good solid number for a cleric. Dexterity. I think I'm going to give him a 13. That gives him a chance to avoid harm. Constitution. I know that in most cases, Constitution is important. But since I have a dwarf in mind for my race, I'm just going to leave this as a 10. As far as intelligence goes, I think I want to wait on that and see where the ball lands. So for wisdom, I'm going to put a 15 there. And I think let's see, 12, 13. Okay, so I'm going to use my 14 or my 8. That's what I need to use. So I think I'm going to put my 8 for charisma. This guy is not very charismatic. And I think I will end up putting my 14 here in Constitution. That way that assures that I'm going to get the most hit points that I can possibly get. So there is the standard array, and I assign them where I'd like to. Now the next step is to click the Backgrounds banner. Open it like that. I'm going to look down this list, which also includes the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. It looks like for this particular build, I am going to make him an acolyte, which kind of lends itself to his class. So he started off as some sort of acolyte background, which is basically spending his early days in the service of a temple. So I'm going to drag that over, and all I have to do is drag and drop. And what it does is it adds these features and these skills to this particular character. So he gets to add 2 languages, he gets religion and insight, and he gets a feature called Shelter the Faithful, and that's part of the background. So I'm going to look at the skills banner, and I have insight and religion. So I know I won't have to pick those again. So I'm going to go back to this page, which is the main tab, close the background, and at this time I'm going to make a shortcut to the background because I need to look at that occasionally to help me build my character background. So I grabbed this and drug it down to these hotkeys, and now there's a shortcut. So if I click on that, I can get to the acolyte description, and I'll be able to read up on all the starting equipment and all the things I get, read on the feature, and then all the tables that go with the background and the personality of this character. So I'm going to close that for now. Next thing is race. I've already decided to be a dwarf because I know they're pretty sturdy. They have immunity to poisons, and they normally get constitution score increases. So I think I'm going to do a hill dwarf because I know they give you extra hit points. So I'm going to open up the races banner. I'm going to grab a dwarf. I'm just going to grab the one from the player's handbook. It doesn't really matter which source, but try to be consistent. In this case, I'm always going to use the player's handbook. And if I was concerned about accidentally dragging from one of these other books, which really doesn't matter anymore, I'm going to filter it to player's handbook. And that way I don't accidentally drag one of the other races from another source. So I'm going to grab dwarf, drag it over. And now it asks me what type of dwarf. So in this case, it's going to be a hill dwarf. Now hill dwarfs are equivalent to shield dwarfs, and mountain dwarfs are equivalent to gold dwarfs. It's just a different wording for them for the setting, which would be the Forgotten Realms. So that those descriptions come from the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. And then, of course, you have your gray dwarfs, which are the Dwergar. So I'm going to click the confirm button or OK, and it tells you what was added. You got a +1 on wisdom. You got the dwarven toughness trait. It gives you your size, tool proficiency, ability score increase, things like that. So now I have a 16 con and a 16 wisdom, and all my other stats were picked earlier. So that's not too bad for a beginning character. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now the next step is to do class and level. So you can, if you want, open up the classes banner and just drag it to the sheet. What I tend to do is I'll open up this class and level window, which is accessed by this little magnifying glass. So if I click that, and then I'm going to open up classes. And from here, I'm going to choose which class. So in this case, I'm going to filter out the player's handbook just in case. And I'm going to grab Cleric, because this guy's going to be a healer. And at first level, I get my archetype, I believe. So I have to make some choices here. So history, insight, medicine, persuasion, and religion. Well, if you remember earlier, I go to the skills tab. I already have insight and religion, so I don't need to pick that. So I'm going to go to religion. Nope, I already have that. So medicine and history. Maybe persuasion, but he doesn't have a very good charisma, so I'm not going to worry about that. And now it wants me to pick from a domain. In this case, I think I'm going to use the life domain, which is going to grant him a lot of extra healing. So I'm going to go ahead and click that and confirm it. And everything that was added is listed over here in the chat window. And as you can see, all the skills have been added already. And I'm done picking my class. So I'm going to close this classes window. And before I do anything else, I'm going to drag this down to the shortcut key, which is this little pin. And that'll make a shortcut in the hotkeys. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to level up. So here's what's going to happen. I'm at first level, I'm pretty much good to go. So to get to the next level, I'm going to type 300. That comes from the player's handbook in the character creation section. So when I want to level up, it is a manual process. So changing any of this stuff up here is not going to change anything on your character. As a matter of fact, a lot of people believe if I change this to 3, that it's going to level it up to 3. It does not. The way to level up is to grab this little pin here on the right-hand side, pick it up, and drop it right back on there. And all it does is it adds another layer to the character, and it adds any extra features that comes with that particular level. So if I go to abilities, these are the things that are being added to the character as I create this character. So the next step is I'm going to go to level 3. That way I make sure that I have all of the features up to level 3, and that's a really good starting level as well. So I'm going to level up one more time, and more things were added, and it will list them here, or it will notate it in this notes here. So I get to start with 30 hit points right off the bat. So Fantasy Grounds gives you the maximum amount of hit points at first level, and then I have an 8-sided for my hit die. So for every level that I increase after first level, I get the average of those die added together, rounded up, plus my Constitution score bonus, plus being a hill dwarf, I have the toughness ability, which adds 1 more hit point per level. So this guy's going to be fairly stout for a 3rd level character. Now, I haven't given him a name yet, but in most cases in the classes, I'll have you use your Discord name. So I think I'm going to just use, his name is going to be Discord. Okay, maybe that's his slang name, who knows. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a profile picture for him. So I'm going to double click here. And I have a bunch of various profile pictures I've already chosen. So from here, I'm going to grab one of these dwarven looking things. So now when I pick this portrait, it becomes my default token. Now they are 2 different things, but for the sake of the class, this is going to be what I'm going to use, and I'm not going to change the token just yet. I think that might confuse, and it may waste time. So I'm going to hold off on messing with that. Another thing I can do is I'm going to change the color of these dice a little bit. They're kind of a pukey brown color. And I do that because that's one of the more difficult dice colors to achieve. So to change your dice color, you click colors up here. You can mess around with this color wheel. And you can see I added more blue, so it made these purple. If I add more red, it does that. Add more green, it does that. Add a little black, that darkens it up. So you see what I'm talking about. And then you can change the color of the text. So now they're green dice with black text. Okay, so I changed the color of dice. I've customized my photo up here. And you want to make sure that this photo that you're selecting, that you have stored on your hard drive or wherever you get it from, is not too big. A lot of people use a huge photo just for a portrait picture. Just find a photo and take the time to edit it down to about 200 by 200 pixels. So that way you can still see it on your computer, but you're not wasting memory. And for tokens, we'll get into that later. But for right now, I'm going to change this XP manually. So at 3rd level, you get 900. And for the next level, it is 2,700. Again, these numbers come from the player's handbook in the leveling section. So that is how you level up in Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm done with that. Everything is pretty much ready to go. I have the hit dice here, which allows you to do some recovery. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to bring the character over to the combat tracker, and that's the first thing your DM should do when you join the table. So now I'm on the combat tracker. So if I have any wounds, let's say I take some damage, 12 points of damage, that's pretty bad. So if I elect to use a hit die or recovery hit die, I can do so by double clicking here. And it will add the applicable healing. But now I only have 2 wounds instead of 7. So it looked like it healed some here, which is good. Now, if your DM allows that, you will be able to recover naturally. And that would be done after a short rest. So technically, the DM should be giving you a short rest, and then you apply your hit die recovery. So I'm going to do a short rest. If you do a long rest, you will recover all 3 of your hit die. So that's a full 8-hour rest. Okay, so here are the stats. Here are the saves. So if your DM asks you for a strength check, you're going to drag the score down into the dice tower. It'll roll, and your DM will be able to see the result. Or he might have you roll it in the open. So you just drag it down here into the chat window. It'll do an open strength check, which these rolls are really bad right now. And then if you want to do a strength save or a dexterity save, same thing, you drag these saves over. So there's my dexterity save in the dice tower, which ended up being 16, which is pretty good. Or I can do it in the chat. And that's a total of 6. So as you can tell, you can do hidden rolls or open rolls depending on your DM's preference. Now you see all these dice are all scattered all over from me grabbing them. So in order for you to fix that or put them back in order, right click on the interface, click arrange dice, and they're there. You can also lock the position. If you end up moving them somewhere and you want them to be parked permanently somewhere else, that is the setting for it. Anyhow, so that's how you rearrange the dice. All right, so that would take care of that. I'm going to open up this little a magnifying glass. And in here, this reads for your combat calculator. So you have dexterity, speed, and armor. Your armor is a stack up of all different factors. Your speed is as well, and so is your initiative. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Next step is I'm going to go ahead and show you the death saves. So the death saves are reserved for when you actually go to 0 hit points. So I'm going to go to 30 hit points of wounds. And I'm going to also put the condition of basically unconscious. And once that tag is on there, Fantasy Grounds knows to automatically roll. And that option can be turned on or off by your DM in the settings. So I'll just show you how this works. So let's say he's dead, and I'm going to add a condition, which is the unconscious. Now, if you receive damage naturally through the game, this effect will be put on there automatically. But I had to force this, so basically I had to add it manually. So now, when I have my turn, I select the character, and when someone passes a turn and it comes back to him, Fantasy Grounds automatically rolls and it tells you if you succeed or not, and it keeps track of it on your character sheet. So I'm going to click the down arrow again. Again, a success. So there's 2 successes. And I click the down arrow again. And that was a success. So what happens is you change to stable. So you're no longer bleeding out. So that is how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the wounds. And I'm going to uncheck these. And then I'm going to remove the effect by clicking on this effects winged boot looking icon. And double clicking both of these to get them off of this combat tracker. Next step is I'm going to go to the skills tab, and we're going to clarify a little bit of that. So we go to skills. Now what this is basically your proficiency score bonus added to any initial stat ability adjustments. So for instance, I have a +2 on my proficiency. My strength is 12, so I get a +1. So that carries over into here. So any of my strengths will have a +1. And if I have a strength-based skill, it will add the proficiency bonus as well. In this case, I don't. Mine are all based on wisdom or intelligence. So I'm going to go ahead and let this ride for now. And I'm going to come back here. So I'm going to click on abilities. And I'm going to go through here. It says I have a bonus proficiency of life. When you choose this domain at first level, you gain proficiency with heavy armor. Well, normally a cleric doesn't have access to heavy armor unless you have a domain or a god that allows for that. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. That way, Fantasy Grounds will know that I'm supposed to be proficient with it. So this does not get added in automatically. You have to add that to this section. So I'm going to close that. Now it says Channel Divinity. Well, Channel Divinity has to do with your domain. So you'll get Turn Undead, and then one other effect that comes from your particular domain and your class. So in this case, it's Preserve Life. So this is my secondary effect for Channel Divinity. So we will get back to those, but I'm going to leave those open for when we're creating a character. I can come back to this. You have Disciple of Life. What this does, it makes your healing spells more effective. So I'll leave that for right now so I can remember it. You have the Life Domain, in which it will give you examples of gods that have to do with the light or life aspect of things as far as domains go. And then here are all the bonus spells that you get. So I will bring this back up later. Shelter of the Faithful. This is a really cool feature that doesn't get used a lot, but it's a role-playing thing. So if you need a ceremony performed, or you're adventuring and you need free healing, or perhaps you need somewhere to stay, those who share your religion will support you, but only you. And you can have a modest lifestyle. And since you have ties to that temple, you can ask for assistance and they can help you with all kinds of things. So it's like getting the support of your local church. So this is a role-playing thing, so I don't need to come back to that just now. And then finally, it lists your spellcasting feature, which is basically an overview of how many spells you get, or at least how it works and what it's based on. One formula you need to pay attention to in particular is spell preparation. So even though clerics get all the spells on the list, and they don't have to build a list, you still can only prepare up to a certain amount of spells. So if you're a 3rd level cleric, you have 4 1st level slots and 2 2nd level slots. But if you have a 16 wisdom, your list of prepared spells can include 6 spells of 1st or 2nd in any combination. If you prepare the 1st level spell Cure Wounds, you can use it at a 1st level or 2nd level slot. Passing the spell doesn't remove it from your list of prepared spells. So that's just how that works. You can change your list of prepared spells when you've finished a long rest. So when you're getting ready to have a long rest, discuss it with your DM, make sure you have the books available to you, and swap your spells out. And this tells you your spell save DC, spell attack modifier, and it goes into the different types of ritual casting and spell focus. So we'll get into that later. Now, I'm also going to look at my traits. So you have Dwarven Combat Training. So with this, you have proficiency with Battle Axe, Hand Axe, Light Hammer, Warhammer. So these two, the Light Hammer and the Hand Axe, are already simple weapons, so they're in that category. However, the Battle Axe and Warhammer are not. Those are martial weapons. So all simple weapons, Battle Axe, Warhammer. So I have to list those if I want to have access to those and have proficiency with it. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I've dealt with it. So make sure you add these if you get those from your race or from your domain or your god or whatever. The next step is languages. He has Common and Dwarvish. I think I'm going to choose the language of his enemies, which in this case would be orcs. He absolutely hates orcs. But he also wants to know the speak of the Undercommon. So he may deal with people in the Underdark, so that's the language they speak. Now these need to be spelt correctly, so that in order for you to be able to utilize this particular language. So I'm going to select Undercommon. Now if I didn't have that listed correctly on my character sheet, I would not be able to use this speech filter. So now I'm going to type something. Hit enter. And if you have that Undercommon on your character sheet, you'll be able to read the translation, all praise to be. But if not, you'll see this gibberish here, which you'll have no idea what was said. So it's kind of a cool feature that doesn't get used a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and select no languages now. That way I can use this later without seeing that gibberish. And I'm going to right click on this and clear this for now. Nice and tidy. So the next thing is Dwarven Resilience. Now this is an advantage on saving throws against poison, and you have resistance against poison. So we will check that out later. So I will keep that, and we'll add that to the character when we build the details of it. We'll be using a lot of Rob Twee's coding effects to build all of these special features and traits. Dwarven Toughness. This is already addressed automatically. I got 1 extra hit point every time I gain a level, and that's already calculated in for being a hill dwarf. Stone Cunning. There's different ways you can handle this, but it says when you make a history or intelligence check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered proficient in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to the check instead of your normal proficiency bonus. There's a couple ways to handle that. I think there's a cleaner way to do it, but you can either use Rob 2E's coding effect, or you can come to skills, click on the edit button here on the bottom, and you'll see this green plus button. And what I'm going to do is make sure I'm proficient, and then I'm going to be double proficient, which means basically that I'm, a expert. I'm going to call this stonework. And I'm going to base it on intelligence. And there it is. It's +4. So even though I'm not very intelligent, I have a pretty good idea of how stone cunning works. And whenever I'm going to ask my DM a question about the stonework in a cave or maybe even the architecture of a building, I would use this skill in particular. So this particular skill is based on history. So I will use intelligence just like the history ability. Now your DM could just have you roll a history check with a doubled bonus here. I think it's cleaner to do it this way and a lot more separated. So that would be your stonework skill for stone cunning. So I don't have to deal with this later, but I'm going to leave it up because I want to show you the difference. So that would be that. Next step is I'm going to go back to the inventory or the abilities section. And there is tool proficiency here. So for being a dwarf, I get to add one of my choice. Smith's tools, brewer's supplies, or mason's tools. I think if I was more of the warrior type, I would do Smith's tools, but I can see him being more of a builder or a brewer. So I'm going to give him mason's tools, because he's really into building walls and things like that, bridges. So I'm going to give him mason's tools. So I'm going to notate that here in the tool proficiencies. And this is just a note for me and my dungeon master, so I'll leave that there. The next step is I'm going to create that specific tool proficiency in my skills section. So again, I'm going to add to my skills. Mason's tools. I'm going to click the star. Now, there isn't really any specific call out for Mason's tools, but honestly, I think this would be related more to wisdom or intelligence. So I think wisdom makes sense in this case. Now I have the Mason's tools in case I need to build something. So you would rarely use these extra things I'm making here, but they come in handy if you're going to do any crafting or any sort of special investigation dealing with architecture or buildings. So I will go ahead and get out of the edit mode. And now I'm going to go back to my abilities tab. So that covers all of these. I've also updated the proficiencies here. And I also have these. And these languages are already done. So now I'm going to go to inventory. So this is the thing that usually ends up taking a ton of time. So with Rob Tui's help, he has made parcels. And what parcels are basically treasure items that contain items. So for instance, I have the background here for the Acolyte. Well, that's what I happen to be, is the Acolyte. So I'm going to choose that package. And what this package will do is it'll give you everything for the Acolyte. So I'm going to drag it over. And here it is. I have the amulet, which is a holy symbol. Clothing, my vestments, which are like your robes or your holy wear that you'd wear in a temple. Incense sticks, a pouch, and a prayer book. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look up the background for the dwarf. So Acolyte. If you look, there's your holy symbol, which is the amulet, a prayer book, which is here, the 5 sticks of incense, the vestment, a set of clothes, and a belt pouch containing 15 gold, and the gold is here. So that's what was added based on this list. Now this is not perfect, but it gives you whatever you need for that background, and it's very handy and quick. Before, you used to have to make these by hand or drag them from a separate items list. Now you just grab this parcel and it drops everything in there. Now there's nothing stopping you from going back and editing these or changing them around a little bit. That's between you and your DM. So the next thing I'm going to do is scroll down, and I'm going to get my starting equipment for a cleric. So I'm going to drag this over. Bam! It just puts everything in there. I don't have to worry about what it is at the moment. I'm going to close this parcels. And basically, it just adds whatever you need to your inventory based on your starting equipment. As you can see, it's got a lot of things. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the word backpack because I'm going to store my stuff in here. And then I have crossbow bolts, and I have a light crossbow. And then I have some rations, which is 2 days worth. I have 10 candles. I don't see any torches, which is good because I don't need torches. And then I have some other equipment. So how I organize these is by container. So one of my containers is the backpack. So I'm going to store this alms box, which is like your donations for your church. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the backpack. So I type that with a capital B to make sure that it actually goes underneath that header. And the blanket as well. Candle. So on and so forth. Now his weapons and his armor and shield, I'm not going to change that. I will leave those out of the backpack. So those do not need to go in the pack. When I click here, it ends up becoming organized into this subheading. So now all this stuff here is stored in the backpack. Another thing is I might grab a few other items that I want for this character. So I'm going to go to Item. This is the master list of equipment. I'm going to get a crossbow bolt case. So here there's case, crossbow bolt. Drag that over. And I'm going to give myself a couple healing potions. I'll just say one, maybe. So here's a potion of healing. Change this to 2, or I can drag it over twice. So I'll drag it over again. Close that. So I just added a few things to my character sheet that I might need. In this case, I'm just showing you the potions so I can show you later how to create those. So I want to do the crossbow bolts. I want to keep those in a case. Potions of healing, I'm going to actually put those in my pouch. The prayer book, I'm going to put that in my backpack. And that should be about it. Don't think I need to mess with too much else. Common clothes, my crossbow, mace. Now, there is 15 gold here in the treasure items. Scale mail, shield, all that stuff is equipped. So if you have this little shirt here, that means it's equipped. Or you're carried. So in this case, the amulet, I don't need 2 of them. So I'll change that to 1. And I'm going to put that in the pouch. Okay. And then for backpack, now that I see what I have organized here, I can actually drop the contents of the pack. So I click this little thing here and click that. This actually drops the weight. So it's at 68.5 pounds. If I pick the backpack back up, now it's at 106. So that's how you can drag and drop your equipment, and also how you manage it and organize it, and also a way where you can illustrate how much weight you're carrying if you want to use that in role-playing or keeping track of what you have. So this is a really quick and easy way to do your equipment. Again, you can also customize it by just dragging over items one at a time. It's very time consuming, especially when you're building a character. So I'm going to move on. Next step is this role-playing stuff. So I'm going to make this guy a male. I don't remember how dwarves age, but he's fairly young for a dwarf. So I think 65 is pretty young. I'm going to make him 4'2". And 220 pounds. 222. His size is medium, which should be there already based on his race. I'm going to make him probably lawful good. And I haven't picked his deity, but I think Lathander would be a good deity, or somebody like that from the Forgotten Realms. So that'll be something you'll have to research for your setting, depending on where you're adventuring. Now, his personality trait, ideal, bonds, and flaws, you can make those up, or I made the shortcut earlier. From his background, you scroll down to the bottom, there's these 4 tables. I'm going to open up the personality traits. In this case, I'm going to pick one of these, and I'm going to drag over number 4. Nothing can shake my optimistic attitude. I'm going to click there and put a space, and you get to pick 2 of these. So I've spent so long in the temple that I have little practical experience dealing with people outside the world, maybe. I idolize a particular hero of my faith and constantly refer to that person's deeds as an example. Definitely sounds like a dwarf. So I drag that there. Now you can also roll. So the next table, I'm going to roll on his ideals. So instead of just picking, I'm going to roll. So I'm going to roll the dice. The output comes out here. It says the ancient traditions of worship and sacrifice must be preserved and upheld. And it's a lawful thing, so that makes sense. So I'm going to drag this text right up to here. Next one, I'm just going to pick. So Bond, he wants to look for an ancient relic. He's looking for revenge, or he owes his life to a priest who took him in when his parents died. I like that. And then the flaw. So I think he judges people harshly, even himself. And that should be good. Now all the notes and appearance are up to you to fill out. If he had a hometown or a backstory, I would definitely put all that here. And I'm going to close the Acolyte background for now. And make sure you go back and pick your deity. That's kind of important for role-playing, especially for paladins and clerics, or healers, even druids sometimes. I'm going to pick this log sheet. Now this is for Adventures League. I don't normally cover this, but you can use this for a detailed dictionary or a log. So you can click Edit List. Click here for a new item. You can make this your log entry. You can title it however you want. If you open this, you have quite a bit of notes and things that you can add in or take down to use for your journal for your campaign. But this was ideally set up around the Adventures League. So that's what this is for. So you can keep records of your adventures. Now the next step is the Actions tab. This is where most of the magic happens. I'm going to go through this and show you how this works. So this particular character, he has a mace and he has a light crossbow. So I'm going to make sure he has the ammo put in here. So he has 20 bolts, and then he has this mace. So I'm going to show you how to create a magical variation of that mace. So the reason I'm doing this, so you get an idea of what you can do with Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to go ahead and click the magnifying glass for that. And that's the properties of the mace. I'm dragging this over out of the way. And I'm going to click the edit button down here. And I'm going to add a new section, which in this case, it'll be called a weapon. So add the weapon. Now as you can see here, it has this little bag. So I'm going to click on the bag until it shows that it's equipped. That way, when I go to combat mode, it doesn't disappear on me. I'm going to open the property box for that. So I'm just going to copy and paste this data. Now all this is going to be the same, except this mace is going to be a mace, comma, +1. It's going to be magic, but I'm going to detail that on the bottom here. So right now I'm going to leave it at base. I'm going to put a 1 in the bonus because you get a +1 to attack. I'm going to drag this dice over, which copies the damage. I'm going to copy the damage type, which you just drag it over. You don't have to retype it. And I'm going to put 1 here. Then after this, I'm going to type the word magic. If I don't put that on there, what will happen is this weapon will not disrupt or attack any creatures like greater undead or demons and devils. They might be immune to standard weapons. Things like ghosts and vampires and that kind of stuff. So that's why you have to have that magic tag there. That's all in lowercase. It's separated by a comma. Next step is I'm going to add some additional damage to this weapon. So now I'm going to give this weapon a name. I'll call this the Holy Roller. Actually, I like that better. I misspelled it. It's the Holy Roiler. Like it. So I'm going to drag this four-sided up, drop it here. It's adding another damage type. So I'm going to call this radiant damage. And now when I attack with this weapon, not only will it do the +1 damage and the magical damage, it'll also do radiant. So you want to make sure that these additional damage types are on different lines. Otherwise, it'll confuse Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to close that, close this. And now I have a magical variation of the mace. It's really not an item, it's just a reflection of the original weapon. So I'm going to get it out of the edit mode. I'm going to change this to preparation. And being that I'm not really going to use this mace anymore, I'm just going to use it as carried. So now when I switch it to combat mode, it only shows the magical variation. So that's how you make a magical weapon. And you can put whatever damage types you want. It doesn't have to be radiant. It can be poison. It can be force. Whatever. Whatever makes sense for you and your DM and your setting. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another section. And I'm going to use this section to basically change the way that I track some of my consumable items. So I'm going to click this add power. To change this category, this header where it says powers, I'm going to change this right hand side cell to say consumables. I'm going to click over here in this cell, and consumables is now the name of the header. I'm going to go ahead and make 3 or 4 more cells, so I'm going to click on the star a few more times. And now I have that. I'm going to copy and paste. There we go. So now I'm going to put my healing potions here. Candles. Ration. I think I'm going to put my incense sticks here. And last but not least, water. The only reason I'm doing this is to make it easier to track this stuff. Instead of flipping back here on the inventory sheet and trying to adjust here, which I'll do at the beginning or the end of the session, but I see I have an insects block and stick. I'm going to track the sticks here. I'm also going to track my rations, my water, and the potions. Everything else is, and the candles. Everything else is not consumable. So I'm going to get out of the edit mode by clicking on edit again. Change this to preparation. I'm going to change all these to say once. And put the quantities here. So now when I change this to combat mode, you now have the dots that you can click on whenever you use these items, and it will record it here in the chat window. Next step is I'm going to go ahead and add functionality to the healing potions. So the healing potions right now are just a note. So I'm going to right click on it, add action, add this heal or the plus button. Now I have to tell Fantasy Grounds how much healing it does. So I'm going to click on this magnifying glass down here. The lighter colored one's harder to see. Oh, okay. And now I'm going to add 2d4. So I'm going to right click on the 4-sided dice, click on 2, and drop it here. And I'm going to add 2 here on bonus. And that takes care of the potion. So the potion itself does 2d4 plus 2 points of healing. Now, since I made this item, it really doesn't give you anything for a description. So I can pull this information from the item itself if I need to. So I'm going to go back to my inventory and go to Healing Potion, which is right here, Potion of Healing. Open this up. It gives you the information. So it's 2d4 plus 2. So I went ahead and added that information. Lock this. So now you have a little bit of lore and understanding of what it is. So close that, go back to the Actions tab, and there you have it. So now when I need to look it up, it's right there. Next thing I'm going to do is add another section. So this time, I'm going to add the section that's going to track all my standard actions. So I'm going to go to the edit, and I'm going to add another power, which really is not a power, it's just a new section. I'm going to call this standard actions. So standard actions are going to be all the things I can do in addition or instead of the fighting or spell casting. So I'm going to add from Rob Tui's coding effects, and all these are stored in the spells. So I'm going to go to spells. I'm going to expand this list. Use this header. Go to 5e effects coding class features. And right on the top is where these actions are held. So I'm going to drag them right here. Okay. Those are standard actions. I'm going to add one additional one that I'm going to make myself, and it's going to account for dropping my shield. So if I need to pull out my crossbow, generally crossbow I think is okay, but some cases, and going to make where you don't have to use two hands sometimes. In this case, I think you can get away with a light crossbow and the shield. But if you were to have like a longbow, you'd have to use two hands. So you might have to use the shield drop action. So all I'm going to do is add the shield drop. So I'm going to hit edit. And then I'm going to add a new section in this group. So I'm going to click this plus button. I'm going to call it drop shield. And now I'm going to add a function to it. In this case, it's going to be an effect. And I'm going to edit this. So I'm just going to call it shield drop. Put a semicolon. And I'm going to minus out the shield bonus. So it's shield drop, AC -2, targeting on self. Now what this does is when you need to drop your shield, you can apply the effect and you do not have to worry about having to manually adjust for that. In most cases, you don't have to mess with it. So I click the edit button now to get out of edit mode. Change this to combat and action. So this bonus drop thing is basically a bonus or a free action, so you don't have to take an action for it. I'm going to put it in the standard actions because it's really nothing special other than removing your shield bonus. So now I'm going to make another section. So that's for the standard actions. Now I'm going to create another section for the class features. So click that. I'm going to click this add power. All his class features. And I'm going to look up his class feature. So we have Stone Cunning, which is not. That's a racial feature. And the Dwarven Resilience. But we do have Life Domain spells, which I'll get to later. We have Disciple of Life, which gives me better healing. We'll deal with that in a little bit. First, we're going to add Channel Divinity. So I'm going to go to down here and source. I'm going to change this to Cleric. So I'm going to look for the correct one. So Channel Divinity, Preserve Life, because I am from the Life domain. So I'm going to drag that over here. And I also get Turn Undead. So Preserve Life. Drop that there. And Turn Undead. So these are the things that I get from my particular god. So that is pretty much all I get at this particular level and for my specific build for my archetype. So I'm going to get rid of this placeholder. And those are basically my abilities for my class features for my cleric. So I'm going to click and exit out of the edit mode. And I'm going to look at these. This one says I get 2 effects, Turn Undead, and 1 other. When you use your Channel Divinity, you can choose which effect to create. You must finish a short or long rest to use your Channel Divinity again. And you get to use it twice as you get further along in your levels. So right now I can only use it once. So right now they're already set to 1 use. So after they're used, I have to wait till I rest. So I want to make sure that that's set right, because it said short or long rest. Let me double check. So this says, yep, short or long rest. So I'm going to check. Preparation, it says daily. So that's actually set to a long rest. So I'm going to change this to rest. Now let me check this, and there we go. So now when I rest, those will come back after a short rest like of an hour. So I'm going to get out of the preparation mode, back here. So we're almost done with that. And I don't think I have any other abilities here except for bonus spells. So we'll get into that later when we get to the spells. So my next step is to do the racial trait. I'm going to make sure I unfilter down here. Don't want to leave that on. And then I'm going to change this to source. I'm going to change it to a dwarf. And now I'm going to click on 5e effects coding race trait. There's your Dwarven Resilience and your Stone Cunning. So I'm going to drag those over to a new section. So I'm going to create the section now. So add a new power. I'm going to call this racial traits. And if I click on it, it will reshuffle in alphabetical order. It's down here now. There's that. And that. I got rid of my placeholder, and now I have my ability. So earlier in the video, I said that I would explain a couple things to you about the Stone Cunning. So I'll leave that aside. Channel Divinity is dealt with. Preserve Life, we have that already. This has to do with restoring hit points. We already got that dealt with. Okay. So now what's going to happen is this Stone Cunning, the way it's coded, is to treat. You only would use this during basically when you get to your history check. And if you didn't have it coded here, like I do with the spells or the skills, So I already made a special one here. But if you didn't make this, then you can use this particular skill. So the way this is coded is Stone Cunning skill. It's double your proficiency, so 2 PRF, history, and then it's an action itself. And what happens is on your next action, this effect goes away. So when you make your skill check, it'll automatically take that effect off. So this is very clever. So there's 2 ways to handle it. I did it the skill way. Then there's also this way, which allows you to only use it during that specific occasion. So I kind of like it separate, but some people like doing it this way. I think both ways are pretty clever. So I close that. So to keep from confusing myself and tripping up, I'm going to delete the actual skill here. I don't need that anymore, now that I know that I have the stonework. So it's gone. So now when I use this skill, stonework, I already have an effect for it, and I roll a history check, and it will automatically double my proficiency bonus. Okay, next thing is spell. So I'm going to filter this to basically level 0, which is my basically your cantrips, and then source, I'm going to go to cleric, and these are all the basic cantrips. Now for my particular character, I'm looking at the cleric description that I made a shortcut of earlier, and from here I can tell how many spells I get per level. So this first one tells me 3rd level, +2 proficiency, and 3 cantrips. So I'm going to go ahead and pick those. I also want to check my life domain spells. So I don't get any bonus cantrips, but I will get bonus spells. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in, and I'm going to drag them right to where it says spell slot. So guidance is something I like. And also spare the dying. They are down here. And I like also, sometimes I like the light spell or Toll of the Dead. I think I'm going to do Toll of the Dead. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to go to my 1st level spells. So according to that table that I had out earlier, I get 4 1st level spells. But I also get bonus spells. So since these are domain spells, Bless and Cure, I'm going to drag them into my class features because it has to do with my domain. So I'm going to go ahead and drag those over there. So Cure and Bless. Now I could drag them from here, but I prefer to use them from Rob Tui's coding effects because they're a lot more complete and descriptive. So I'm going to go to 1st level. I am going to drag over Bless, which is a domain spell. And I'm going to cast, or going to bring over Cure Wounds. So that is also a domain spell. Now, these do not count against my daily spells, and they are almost like bonus spells that I get because of my life domain. So while I'm here, I might as well grab the 3rd level spells, and I'll wait. So let's go with 1st level spells. Now I'm going to pick the spells that I want from 1st level. So I could potentially drag every single one of these spells over, because that's one of the things that clerics get. However, I'm only going to grab the ones that I use the most. So, Shield of Faith, yes. Protect from evil or good, yes.
Vae Victus!
I'm also going to do Healing Word. Make sure I don't already have that. Nope. So I'm going to do that. Healing word. Let's see. Drag that up there. Guiding bolt. Yes. I'm going to do bless. And maybe detect magic. That's a pretty good array of spells to choose from. So I'm going to collapse these so they don't take so much room. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the second level spells. So at second level spell, I also, for my third level, I get lesser restoration and I get spiritual weapon. So spiritual weapon is a bonus spell. So I'm going to put this in my domain features. It's a domain spell. And then lesser restoration as well. Okay. Now I can pick from my spells. So I'm going to do Prayer of Healing. Let's see, locate object. I'm going to do hold person, find traps, continual flame, and aid. Those are pretty handy. Silence, 120-foot radius. Don't pass that up. And that should be good. So that will take care of that. I have all these spells now at my fingertips. So when I want to switch my spells out, these are the most common ones. If you need to come back and look at others, that's between you and your DM. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way. And now I need to change one other thing up here in my class features. Since these spells are based on my wisdom and they're bonus spells, since they're not in a spell category, I need to change the metadata. So how I do that is go to this class features up here, click this magnifying glass, and I'm going to click the ability it's based on. So it'd be wisdom in this case. That's that. I'm not going to set usages up. That way, when they're used, they calculate the DC correctly. So right here, if there was any DC calculations, it would be set up in there. So in this case, there isn't. But anything that would need a DC spell save or anything like that, that would basically calculate for that. So that's that. Now, I'm going to close the spells. I'm going to change this to preparation. Now, I'm only going to be able to prepare as many spells as I have for levels plus my proficiency score bonus. So I can do up to about 5 or 6 of them. So no more than that per day. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare my spells. So bless, I will probably want that. It's already up here. So definitely want that, but I'm going to do healing word, protection from evil and good, shield of faith, guiding bolt, bless. So that's that. Another thing I'm going to do is hold person, prayer of healing, silence, and that's probably about it. Maybe aid. We're good there. So once I've prepared the spells, change it back to combat and change the display as actions. So as you can see, this character sheet is shaping right up. I have all my spells, class features, consumables, my racial traits, cantrips, first and second level spells, and standard actions. So now what I'm going to do is check these out. So these spells will still work, but they don't count against my memorization for the basically for the duration of this. So what happens is your spells that you have for life domain, it basically gives you a promotion in your spells based on your domain. So I don't have to use these, and they don't count against my daily prepared spells. So that's why I put them in the domain section. So I can still use them. They still cost a spell slot, but they don't go against my daily prepared. So that's cool. The next thing is Disciple of Life. So at first level, your healing spells are more effective because of my domain. Whenever you use a first level spell or higher, so not cantrip, first level, and if it heals, it will regain additional hit points equal to 2 plus the spell's level. So I'm going to go to first level spells, and I do have Healing Word. So I'm going to open that up. It does 1d4. So I open this up, and what will happen is I'm going to add 2 here, because it is, that's the thing, is 2 plus the spell's level. So should have left that at base. Okay, and I'm going to go to 3 here. So it's 2 plus the spell's level. So this is a bonus of 3. So now that adds 3. Now, do I have any other healing spells? So hit points increased by 5. So this isn't really a healing, but let me look at the properties. Yeah, that doesn't really get that. Prayer of Healing, definitely. So I'm going to click that, open this up, and put 3 in here. That takes an account for my Disciple of Life. And that should be it. So that takes care of the healing spells. So Healing Word, and let me double check up here. Cure Wounds, that's a first level spell. So I need to do that one as well. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to click here, put a bonus of 3. So now I get a total of 6 because of my, basically because of my wisdom. To make sure that everything's kosher here, I'm going to go to the metadata, change that to wisdom. That way, make sure that all the spell DCs are correct. Normally, Fantasy Grounds will parse that on its own. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure why. But anyhow, I should be able to check that now. So yes, now all the heals are proper. So now, if I look at something that's a cast like Hold Person, I open that up. The spell Wisdom DC is 13. So it's 8 plus my level plus my particular ability score, which is Wisdom. So it's all set. So that should be it for the character. I'll close that. Dwarven Resilient. So this is something that you get automatically. So when you're on the combat tracker, you want to make sure you enable all your racial abilities. In this case, it'll just be the Dwarven Resilience. So that gives me advantage against saving throws and poison. So that takes care of that. I don't use Stone Cunning until that comes up in roleplay. All these other actions would be performed during play. So hopefully that is helpful to you. I pretty much covered most everything. And one thing that I encourage you to do is when you're done, do /, type the word save as a command, and hit enter. That will allow you to save whatever work you've done, and it will save your character, especially if you're on someone else's table. So once I'm done, I'm going to close this, or I can probably go and pick a token. I did mention that I would do that. So if your DM allows it, there you have a token library loaded. Your DM will ask you which token you'd want. In this case, I have a Dwarven token set aside for this particular character. I drag it from the tokens up to there, and now I have a token. But as you can see, it hasn't changed here. So I'm going to remove this and re-add, and now the token shows. So instead of using your portrait photo, it's going to use this token. So that should take care of most of what you need to know to build a semi-complicated character. So we went over the main page, and the build order was abilities, background, race, class, and then here we leveled up by dragging this little shield. We made a shortcut that went down here, made a shortcut for the acolyte down in here, so that way we have that for later. We created a couple custom skills. One of them we didn't really have to, but I wanted to show it to you. We went over some of your ability skills and traits. We went ahead and made notations if we needed to. We added languages. We managed your inventory, used Rob2E's parcels to make that process quicker and easier for you. I put a little bit of notes in here. It's not too detailed, but this is not a campaign, so I didn't go that far. I showed you what the log sheet is, and we went through a very detailed list of how to create custom functions on your character creation. So the next class will be combat, and I will use the same character to do a short and brief combat scenario. So this will help both the player and the DM. So farewell, happy gaming, see you next time.